Listen to the steel symphony of the city. A layered harmony of ambition, noise, and the silent dreams of millions. Out of that restless music came this journey back to a place that felt smaller than memory and heavier than it had any right to feel. The drive back to Millhaven always seemed shorter than I remembered, as if the town reached for you before you were fully ready to let it. I had not been back in 3 years, not since the funeral, not since the holidays my stepmother made too uncomfortable to bother with, not since my father stopped calling on my birthday and began sending cards instead. Signed cards, not written ones, as if a signature alone was enough to stand in for a relationship. The GPS said 14 minutes. I turned it off and drove the rest from memory. Past the grain elevator with the faded co-op logo. Past the water tower someone had repainted since I left. Past the diner where my father used to take me on Sunday mornings before Evelyn. Before the second wedding. Before everything quietly rearranged itself around her comfort and my absence. I had not told anyone I was coming. That was not strategy. It was just easier. When I told people in advance, there were phone calls, then negotiations, then Evelyn's voice in the background of whatever conversation I was trying to have with my father, gently steering it somewhere else. This way, I would simply arrive. Whatever happened after that would belong to everyone else. The reunion had been my grandmother's idea, her 90th birthday. She had announced it 6 months earlier and made it very clear that she intended to celebrate with every living relative, no exceptions. When she said it, she looked directly at my father. My grandmother was the kind of woman who made eye contact feel like a verdict. My father had nodded. 2 days later, my aunt called and said, "Gran wants you there." I said yes before I really thought about what yes meant. It meant Millhaven. It meant the old farmhouse on County Road 7, the one that had been in the family since my grandfather built it. It meant my father's side of the family, most of whom I had not seen since I was 19, and leaving for the first time, bag over one shoulder, pretending I was not as relieved as I actually was. And yes, it meant Evelyn. My stepmother had been in my father's life for 11 years. They married when I was 20, 6 months after my mother passed away, which my father explained was not as fast as it looked because he and Evelyn had known each other for years before that. I was apparently supposed to find that comforting. I did not. I filed it away instead, right beside the weather, the property lines, and the very specific way my father had of looking slightly past me when he spoke, like something more important might be standing just over my shoulder. Evelyn was not cruel in the obvious ways. She never shouted, never threw anything, never made a scene anyone could point to. What she did was quieter, softer, and in some ways more effective than anger. She framed everything as concern. She worried about me. She worried I worked too hard, traveled too much, had too few roots. She worried I was making choices that would leave me alone. And she always said these things in front of other people, which meant any response from me would sound defensive. So most of the time I said nothing. Then she would tell my father I was distant. She had been saying that for years. What I had actually been was a trauma surgeon for the last 6 years, first residency, then fellowship, then on staff at a level 1 trauma center in Baltimore. What I had actually been was someone working 80-hour weeks and then going home to a small apartment, trying to remember what normal life was supposed to feel like. What I had actually been was exhausted in the way only certain jobs can make a person exhausted. The kind that comes from spending years with your hands inside other people's bodies, trying to keep them alive. That kind of tired does not disappear with sleep. I never talked about it much at home. There never seemed to be a place for it. The last time I visited, 2 years earlier, Evelyn had asked at dinner how work was going. I started to tell a story about a pediatric case that had stayed with me. She nodded twice, then turned to my father and asked if he wanted more bread. I finished the sentence anyway to no one in particular, then picked up my fork and kept eating. That was that. Later that night, in the kitchen, she told my cousin she was worried about me, said I seemed detached, said the kind of work I did was hard on a person, and she was not sure I was processing it the right way. My cousin told me afterward, apologetically, the way people do when they know the truth they are carrying is going to land hard. I drove home the next morning instead of staying the second night. I thought about that now as I drove into Millhaven. I thought about the pediatric case too. A 7-year-old named Marcus who came in after a car accident and walked out of the hospital 6 weeks later on his own 2 feet. I thought about how that story had never really gotten told in my father's house. And I thought about all the stories like it, the ones that had piled up over 6 years into something I was quietly proud of. The private kind of pride, the kind built in long nights and fluorescent light and silence. I pulled into the long gravel driveway just after afternoon had settled in. The farmhouse looked the same, white siding, green shutters. The big oak in the front yard, the one my grandfather planted when my father was born. Cars were already lined up along the grass. I recognized my aunt's minivan, my cousin Rachel's sedan, a truck I did not know. I sat in my car for a moment before getting out. My grandmother was already on the porch by the time I reached the steps. 90 years old, and she moved like age was merely an inconvenience she had agreed to tolerate. She took my face in both hands and looked at me the way she always had, as if she were checking whether I was still the same person underneath everything. "You came?" she said. "You asked." "I ask a lot of people things," she said. "Not everyone listens." Then she patted my cheek once, firmly, turned, and went back inside. And I followed her. That was the welcome home. The kitchen smelled exactly as it always had. Coffee. Something baking. And that dry wooden scent old houses keep when they have been lived in hard and long. My Aunt Carol hugged me without saying anything for a good while, which was more than I expected and exactly what I needed. Rachel waved from across the room where she was arranging plates. Two younger cousins I barely recognized tore through the hallway chasing each other. My father was in the living room. He stood when I walked in. He had always done that. An old-fashioned courtesy I once found touching, and now found harder to read. He looked older, not dramatically, just in the way people do when you have only been seeing them in fragments, and then suddenly the fragments add up. "Sarah," he said. "Hi, Dad." We hugged the way we always did. Brief, slightly formal. Like two people who remembered a closer version of themselves but could not quite reach it anymore. Then Evelyn stepped in from the dining room. She was wearing a blue dress, earrings, and that particular expression she saved for family events. Warm, polished, slightly performative. As if being the ideal hostess were not just a role but a contest she intended to win. "Sarah," she kissed the air near my cheek. "We didn't know you were coming. Gran invited me." Of course she did. The smile never slipped. "It's been what, 2 years? About that?" "About that." She studied me in the quick measuring way she had, like she was adding columns in her head. "You look tired." I did not look tired. I had slept well at the hotel the night before for precisely that reason. But this was Evelyn's talent. She named a thing, and suddenly the room adjusted around it. "Long drive," I said. She nodded, satisfied, then went to find my father's arm. The afternoon unfolded the way family afternoons always do. Food appeared from nowhere. Conversations overlapped. Children ran in and out of rooms as if the walls themselves had permission to ignore them. My grandmother held court at the head of the long table my grandfather built with his own hands, and people drifted toward her one by one, then in pairs. She gave each person the same impossible gift, full attention, the kind that makes you feel like the entire room has narrowed to just you. I spent most of the afternoon near Rachel. She was the cousin I had stayed closest to over the years, the one who texted me from time to tell me the things about the family no one else would have told me. She had been the one who repeated the kitchen comment from 2 years ago. She had also been the one to send messages that said only, "I know, I'm sorry, you're not crazy." We stood near the back window with our plates and talked. About her job, about mine, about her kids, about the general state of things people discuss when there is history under every sentence but not enough privacy to pull it all into the light. She asked about a case I had mentioned once and remembered the details, which almost no one outside medicine ever does. "You're still at the same hospital?" she asked. "Yeah. I got bumped up to attending last year. I'm running trauma now on nights." Her eyes widened. "That's a big deal. It's a lot of overnight shifts." She laughed softly. "You love it, though." I thought about that for a second. Then I nodded. "Yeah, I really do." And that was when I heard Evelyn's voice from across the room. Not loud exactly, but carrying. That particular tone she used when she wanted to be overheard while still pretending she was speaking privately. "She's always worked so hard, I just worry about the life she's not building." You know, she's what, 32? 33? There's more to life than a career. I did not look over. Rachel did. Briefly. Then she turned back to me. "Don't," she said quietly. "I'm not doing anything." "Good." I held my plate a little tighter and kept my eyes on the window. Outside, late sunlight lay across the yard in long warm bands, and for one suspended moment, I let myself stand still inside that silence before the next thing came. Later in the afternoon, after everyone had eaten and the older relatives had begun to settle into that slow, satisfied quiet that follows a long family meal, I slipped away to find my grandmother. She was in the small sitting room off the hallway, the place she always retreated to when the house grew too loud. She sat in the wingback chair by the window, the late summer light falling softly across her hands. She gestured toward the chair across from her without even turning her head. I sat. For a while. Neither of us said anything. Outside, two of the younger cousins were throwing a ball in the yard. The light had gone golden, low and warm and almost painfully beautiful. The kind of beauty that asks nothing from you and offers no explanation for itself. Then my grandmother spoke. Your stepmother means well. I let out a breath through my nose. I know. She just doesn't know how not to be the center of a room. That earned the faintest shift in my expression, but I said nothing. Some things did not need to be confirmed. They had already been lived. How is the work? She asked. Not the social version of the question. Not the polite one people ask while already looking over your shoulder for someone else to talk to. The real one. So I told her. I told her about the cases that had stayed with me. The ones that went well. The ones that did not. I told her about the weight of the losses. The strange, cold clarity of trauma work. The way one bad night could sit in your bones for weeks, even while the world kept moving. I told her about a woman who came in after a highway accident. Someone who should not have survived and only did because the team was sharp and the timing was right and, for once, every moving part aligned exactly the way it needed to. Then I told her about Marcus. 7 years old. Car accident. 6 weeks in the hospital. And finally, one day, walking out on his own 2 feet. At last, that story was told in this house. My grandmother listened the way she always had, as if time itself had paused to make room. She never interrupted, never rushed, never offered shallow comfort. When I finished, she looked at me and said, "You found the right thing." I swallowed once. I think so. Not everyone does. We sat there a little longer after that, not saying much. Her hand came down over mine, light but certain, and for a brief moment everything inside me that had been clenched for years eased just a little. Then I stood and went back to the party. Dinner stretched on long and loud and good in the particular way. Family dinners sometimes can when enough time has passed that the old fights have worn thin around the edges. My grandmother's sisters told stories I had never heard before. My aunt burned the rolls, and everyone ate them anyway. Rachel's youngest fell asleep under the table. Plates were passed. Glasses refilled. Voices crossed and rose and softened again. It almost felt easy. Then dessert came out, and my uncle stood to make a toast. And after he finished, someone asked whether anyone else wanted to say anything. And Evelyn said she did. She stood with her glass in her hand, and that practiced, composed smile already in place. "I just want to say," she began, "how lucky we are to have this family. Ruth, you built something here." She looked toward my grandmother at the head of the table. "The way you've kept everyone together all these years. Even the ones who—" She paused just a fraction of a second. Then she looked at me. "Drifted. You never gave up on anyone, even when they gave you reason to." She smiled again and raised her glass. Everyone drank. I sat perfectly still, my hands resting in my lap. Under the table, Rachel pressed her knee lightly against mine. No one said anything. Conversations resumed in fragments. Shoulderwear clicked. A child laughed in the other room. But the air had changed. I could feel it. Across the table, my father stared at the tablecloth for one long moment. And again I had the same thought I had carried for years, though now it had lost most of its heat. What does it cost a person to stay silent while someone they love gets turned into a cautionary detail in another person's story? I did not think it angrily anymore. Mostly, I thought it tiredly. At the head of the table, my grandmother was watching me. I lifted my eyebrows just slightly, the silent way of asking, "Are you all right?" She made the smallest motion with one hand, something between patience and wait. So I waited. The cake was cleared. People started to stand. Conversations broke into smaller groups, the drifting kind that happen at the end of gatherings when departures begin to form. I was standing by the kitchen doorway talking to my aunt when I heard the front door open. I paid no attention at first. People had been coming and going all day. Then I heard my grandmother's voice, warm, specific. And another voice answered, one I did not recognize. Then I heard my name. I turned. A woman stood in the dining room doorway. She looked to be in her 60s, silver hair pulled back, posture straight in the unmistakable way of someone who had spent decades in rooms that demanded discipline. She was in civilian clothes, but the bearing was still there, the kind of presence that survives the uniform long after the uniform is gone. My grandmother stood beside her, smiling. "This is my granddaughter," she said. "Sarah." The woman looked straight at me, and something in her expression sharpened. "Sarah Calloway?" "Yes." She crossed the room and held out her hand. "Ellen Marsh," she said. Hopkins Surgical Department. I read your paper on hemorrhagic shock management last year. The room went quiet in that very specific family way, where everyone suddenly became deeply interested in not appearing to listen. We've been using your protocol in our trauma bay since February, Dr. Marsh continued. I also served with your grandmother's late husband 30 years ago. Ruth has been telling me about you for years. I just didn't realize she meant the Sarah Calloway. Somewhere behind me, I heard Evelyn's voice stop in the middle of whatever sentence she had been saying. The protocol was a team effort, I said, because it was true. The paper has your name on it, Dr. Marsh replied simply. Then she asked, your grandmother tells me you're running trauma at Baltimore General now. Night attending? Yes, I've heard they're building a new trauma research center, she said. I've also heard your name in that conversation. She said it plainly. No flourish, no performance. Just fact, delivered by someone with no reason to dress truth up in anything softer. You should call me. I sit on the advisory board. The room had gone so still I could hear my grandmother's mantel clock ticking from across the room. Without turning, I knew my father was standing near the far wall. I knew Evelyn was beside him. I did not look at either of them. Instead, I looked at Dr. Marsh, and in one rush, I thought about everything at once. The 7 years since medical school, the 80-hour weeks, the nights that would not leave my body even after I slept, the cases that went wrong, the ones that went right, the paper that took 11 months to write and got rejected twice before publication, Marcus walking out of the hospital on his own 2 feet, all of it. I'll call you, I said. Dr. Marsh nodded once, reached into her jacket pocket, and handed me a card. Then she turned toward my grandmother, and the two of them moved off toward the sitting room, already deep in conversation. Only then did the room exhale. Rachel appeared beside me almost immediately. For a second, she said nothing at all. Then, very quietly, that's the Dr. Marsh from Hopkins. I know. Rachel glanced across the room. Evelyn looks like she's doing math she doesn't like the answer to. I did not laugh, but I came close. The party began to wind down after that, the way parties always do. Cars started loading. Children were carried out half asleep. My aunt pressed leftovers into my hands as if nourishment could solve everything. At the door, my grandmother held me for a long time and said into my hair, I've been telling people about you for years. I thought you should know. That landed harder than anything else had. I stepped out onto the porch after she went back inside. Evening had cooled the air now, just a little, that brief August cool that never lasts. My father came out a minute later and stood beside me, looking out at the yard, the oak tree, the cars pulling away down the gravel drive. For a while, neither of us said anything. Then he spoke. I didn't know about the paper. I kept looking at the yard. You didn't ask. He was quiet for a long moment. Then finally, I'm sorry. The words sat between us. Small, late, but real. I don't say that enough, he added. I looked at the tree my grandfather had planted, at the porch light catching the undersides of the leaves, and I felt the strange weight of honesty when it arrives years after it should have. I know, I said. Not forgiveness. Not yet. Just acknowledgement. Just the truth of where we were standing on that porch, at the beginning of something that might take years to repair, or might never fully happen at all, but had at least finally been spoken aloud. He went back inside. I stayed there a few minutes longer, alone with the cooling air and the gravel drive nearly empty now, and let the silence settle. The gravel driveway was almost empty now. Beyond the fence, the fields lay dark and still, stretched out under the last breath of evening. Somewhere a few miles away, a car's headlights swept briefly across the tree line and vanished again. I stood on the porch and thought about driving back tomorrow. I thought about the hospital on Tuesday, the overnight rotation, the particular smell of the trauma bay that I had stopped noticing years ago, and now could not imagine living without. I thought about the research center, about the possibility in it, about what that call to Dr. Marsh might mean if I made it. And more than that, I thought about my grandmother's hand resting on mine in the sitting room, her voice calm and certain. You found the right thing. That stayed with me. After a few more minutes, I went back inside. The house had shifted into that last phase of a family gathering, the unguarded one. Chairs slightly out of place. Half-finished glasses on side tables. Serving dishes stacked by the sink. The noise was lower now, softer, thinned out by departures and the fatigue of a long day. I moved through the room saying the final good nights, hugging the relatives who were left, promising nothing dramatic, only that I would not disappear for quite so long again. Then I went to the kitchen to help my aunt with the last of the dishes. That was where Evelyn was. We were alone for a moment, and the silence between us felt different now. Not sharp, not dramatic, just plain. The kind of silence that arrives after the performance has ended, When the guests are gone or nearly gone and all that remains is fluorescent light, cooling dishes, and whatever truth is left once no one is watching. She looked at me. I looked at her. For a second, it seemed like she might say something. Maybe an explanation. Maybe another small, carefully polished remark disguised as concern. Maybe even something honest. She opened her mouth as if the words had reached the edge. And then she said nothing. I set my dish on the counter. "Good night, Evelyn," I said. And I meant it exactly as it was spoken. Not warmly, not coldly, not with forgiveness, not with accusation, not with any need to win or wound. Just the words themselves. Clean. Finished. Enough. Then I turned off the kitchen light on my way out because the switch was right there. And that was all. I drove back to the hotel with the windows down. The air had that late August softness that makes the world feel briefly suspended, as if summer is holding on by memory more than temperature. The radio found a station playing something old and unhurried, and I left it there. I did not need anything new. I did not need anything loud. I just drove. And for the first time in a very long time, something inside my chest was quiet. Not because everything had been fixed. It had not. Not because my father had transformed into someone else. He had not. Not because my stepmother had been defeated, exposed, or somehow made smaller by the day. That was not what happened either. And not because the years had suddenly rearranged themselves into something fairer than what they had been. None of that was true. What was true was simpler than that, and maybe more powerful for being simple. My grandmother had known. She had always known. She had been telling people about me for years. She had carried my name into rooms I had never entered. She had spoken of my work, my effort, my life, even when I was not there to hear it. While I had been moving through long nights in Baltimore, through 80-hour weeks, and operating rooms and exhaustion and solitude, someone had been witnessing me. Someone had understood the shape of what I was building, even in silence. That mattered more than I could explain. The city would be waiting when I got back. The steel symphony, the noise, the ambition, the endless rush of lives colliding and parting under fluorescent light and sirens in dawn, breaking over hospital windows. That world was still mine. The trauma bay was still mine. The work was still mine. The research, the nights, the cases that would come, and the ones that would stay with me long after they were over, all of it was still there. But now something else was there too. Not closure, not peace in any permanent sense. Just a steadier kind of ground beneath me. I thought again of the farmhouse on County Road 7, of the white siding and green shutters, of the big oak tree planted when my father was born, of my grandmother at 90, moving through that house like time was a thing she acknowledged but had no intention of obeying. I thought of my father standing beside me on the porch, finally saying the words that should have been said years ago. Late words, yes. Incomplete words, but real. And real counts for something. The road out of Mill Haven curved past the water tower and the grain elevator and the diner where Sunday mornings used to belong to a different version of my life. I passed each of them again in reverse, and this time they felt less like accusations and more like markers. Evidence that a place can hold everything at once. What hurt you, what made you, what you lost. What, somehow, still remained. I kept driving. No grand revelation arrived. No sudden tears. No perfect clarity. Just the road, the music, the open window, and the strange, unfamiliar lightness of not needing the night to be anything more than what it had been. Enough. Exactly enough for tonight. At the hotel, I sat in the parking lot for a moment before going in, hands still on the wheel, the song on the radio fading into another one. I thought about Tuesday, about the next overnight shift, about the next patient I would meet at the worst moment of their life, about the practiced choreography of the trauma team, the clipped language, the blood, the speed, the moments when everything hangs on instinct and training, and whether your hands stay steady. That life would begin again the moment I stepped back into it, and I was ready to return. Because for all the exhaustion, for all the years of being misunderstood at home, for all the conversations cut short or redirected or quietly diminished, none of it had changed the essential truth. I had found the right thing. I had built something real. I had become someone my grandmother spoke of with pride, someone Dr. Marsh recognized by name, someone who had earned her place not through performance, but through years of difficult, unglamorous, relentless work. No one could take that from me. Not silence, not distance, not Evelyn's concern. Not my father's failure to ask the right questions soon enough. None of it. When I finally got out of the car, the night air met me softly. I looked up once at the dark sky above Mill Haven, then headed inside. Tomorrow I would drive back. Tuesday, I would return to the hospital, and somewhere beyond all of that, waiting like a door not yet opened, was the possibility Dr. Marsh had placed in my hand on a small card in a quiet room full of listening relatives. I did not know yet what would come of it. I only knew this. For the first time in a long while, I did not feel like a person standing outside her own life, trying to explain herself through a closed door. I felt like someone who had been seen clearly and could now carry that knowledge forward. The years behind me were still the years behind me, but tonight, for once, they did not feel heavier than the road ahead.